So, to kick things off and put you guys on the spot, let's start with kind of the tweaks that were made throughout the week. We can skip the ballistic discussion a little bit, but there was some small tweaks to Kanu, the buff to signal chance, and the rework of how earlier in the orbit, the higher the chance for signal, and the Shakar now giving a chance for signal as well. How is that sort of playing on the planet?
I did kind of notice that spawning Shack over and over again kind of gets out of control. The first spawn is like pretty doable based on your CE, and I think the more signals are down, the bigger the spawn gets, and it just gets like crazy. I doubt that.
Yeah, I feel like on top of that, you're sort of forced to drop to Konu preparing for Shack now. So like you can't actually do anything else because if you're not on planet alone, someone's inevitably going to spawn, and then they're going to like come find you and one shot your base.
I I do like that mechanic because I think it's so I like it and I understand the frustration with it. I'll be let me go with that because it makes a nice risk reward piece to it because you kind of some people go in there and they have a great run and they're getting 8, 10, 12 tuned units. I mean that's a really nice haul. Uh, there needs to be some counter to that where maybe you're going to have a bad run on the planet and the shack are just going to completely take over the signal chance. So the number of signals that are accumulated does increase the number of shack that spawn. So the more signals you have, the higher your risk of having that monster spawn of shack. There's also the cascade mechanic where if someone has a bunch of signals and gets knocked off the planet, suddenly all those signals become Shakar as well.
So the problem I see with that, so the problem I see with that, especially since you pointed it out, is that kind of like the saving the bandits till closer to the end of the cycle, you can keep spawning and not actually harvest any of the shack until after, 30, 40 turns in, if you're just sitting there farming with you and maybe your faction, and then you salvage all of them closer to the end of the cycle, and you still get all the same signals, but you're not having to deal with the larger spawns.
They're off of kills, not salvages for Shack.
Yeah, so I also tried out that mechanic, and I feel like even with the
Hmm.
signal chance decrease at the end of the turn, I was still able to get like the same amount of signals as I was before you did the new tiered chance. But yeah, it also does feel like you're sort of pushed even more to doing this sort of cheesy strat because if you just continuously spawn and salvage at the beginning of the cycle, inevitably going to run into Shack.
So maybe Shack need to scale just a bit more slowly, and the overall chance for signal higher chance at the beginning, lower chance later on, slightly less Shack scaling. Is that a better direction for? Okay, let's take some notes on that.
Signal chance off of Shack about the same. It seems right. Maybe just make the scaling go down a little.
Got that? Any other feedback on Kanu?
What do you think about lowering the overkill on buildings from Shack? Because I know Shack do like a crap ton of damage to buildings, and sometimes it's just they're unsalvageable. Wanted to see if you had any thoughts on that. Maybe lowering that a little bit so that you don't have these buildings that just got nuked by Shack and then they're unrecoverable. There's really no way to play around that.
Yeah, Shack have a huge damage bonus to buildings. That was just so they were more of an active fight on planets that had enormous bases versus, oh, I've just got a really big base and the Shack are just going to bounce off it.
Yeah, so the damage is fine. It's more the overkill of I fought the Shack and I beat him, But now all my buildings are, negative 50% chance to salvage.
Let me take a look at the overkill code really quick. While I'm pulling that up, does anyone else have feedback they want to provide on Kanu Shack?
No, I do have feedback on overkill though. It's something I actually mentioned before regarding units. Is maybe there should be like a minimum salvage percentage based on maybe either the Rockhound merit or the bots or the unit type, like the Hermit or something like that, as opposed to just there actually being 100% unsalvageable. Uh, Same thing with the buildings. If we're going to use the argument that, well, a unit was totally destroyed, it's unsalvageable. It's just a complete. There's pieces of metal around that can make the same argument for a building as well.
Okay, so maybe some bare minimum chance of salvage, like 5%.
I say five sounds reasonable. I mean, I would have went as low as one. Just when you see a negative percentage, just like if you're telling me I can like find anything.
You found pieces of pieces.
I guess if you really think about it, it does kind of fit with the lore of, oh, that unit just got decimated so bad, there's no way you're ever getting it back.
And yeah, and Shack are literally nuking buildings. I mean, there's rubble.
Yeah, it's not really a problem outside of the katana, really. It's just when you have the Shack with the like really high damage multiplier, buildings are just almost never salvageable. Maybe if it dies to a harb, it's okay, but I mean, if that thing dies to a howler, I think that building's done.
Okay. So buildings could be made a little more resistant to overkill. Maybe they have like half the reduction in salvage chance that units have. That's a bit more work. Let me see if we can let me see about a just straight minute, like leaving like 1 or 5% chance to salvage to start. All right, so, but in terms of risk reward tuned units, um, how's the Kanu risk reward? If it sounds like it's skewing a little heavy towards the Shack, but at the same time, the Shack giving signals is also balancing out that reward aspect nicely.
I love that Shack gives signals now. It actually, because before there was really no point in Konu over all this. I mean, I guess you get a base, but even then, it wasn't that great. I do think people who aren't down geared for Shack kind of have a little bit of surprise waiting for them, and that's, I don't know if that's really intended, but
Yeah, I guess, and that probably feeds into the fact that all our documentation is wiped out. The wiki is toast, so even people coming back are having to read through all these updates, and new players are just absolutely in the weeds because there's no documentation for them to read about, anything about drop shock and how to play the game, aside from the tutorials, which are old and give you some idea, but there's someone someone made the comment that you could write multiple books about all the mechanics and you still wouldn't have anything.
Yeah, I think it is still kind of frustrating that you have to drop prepared for Shack every time, especially since with Konu, like historically, there have been so many other things that you can do on planet. Uh, there's like mining bases, there's the relics, and Konu has always been like a crew training planet for me as well. And so with the addition of signals, I was able to like train 4 crews per cycle while doing the transmission stuff, and it just feels like you, all of those additional things have now just been overwhelmed by the fact that like you have to prepare for Shack each time.
Okay, I've got the chances here. I'm going to bump those up by about. I'm gonna make so it was kind of 1 in 8 or about an 8% chance for that first spawn, and then it would just kind of spiral from there because the signals would make that more and more common. I'm going to bump that up by about 75%, so it's going to be about a 4% chance of that first spawn, and that should see Shack spawn a little later and a little less frequently.
Just to clarify, is this based on total signals across everyone on planet, or is it just whoever is the person spawning?
It's total across the planet.
Okay.
Yeah, some of these should be refined, but that means it's completely doable. Just building the code to track it by person, and then the person who spawned it. It gets a little more cheesable that way because then you can designate someone to spawn and someone to fight. Um, so it's more planet wide. If that becomes a big hassle, we can look into revisiting that. All right, so we'll go from a kind of chance of first shack at about 8% to 4%. We can see how that plays.
What are your thoughts on not having Shack spawn if you're under a certain CE?
I don't want to make it completely safe because even if you're low CE, you can probably manage. You can like quickly rush your units out of the area and negate it unless you drop to the base, and then you're just going to have to decide what you want to do with the base. I don't want to make it so you can completely negate that threat.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering for some of the people who didn't want to have it spawn, but I know that the spawns are pretty small for low CE.
Definitely, like that first spawn. If you're low CE, if you were anticipating it, and you brought a couple of units, like hey, these are my Shack killers, you probably can manage it. Late game, you're most likely looking at running, or maybe you've got a faction mate that dropped large or something like that. But I do want to make it so, oh boy, they showed up, but maybe I want to take this fight. I want to leave that possibility open for you.
Yeah, I've had some good experiences facing that first wave, and then I've been wiped by that second wave.
Okay, so I think lowering the spawn chance will push that first wave later in the cycle, and then because the signals build, that should also lower the amount of Shack kind of as the planet goes through its orbit. Okay, let me go back to notes. So why don't we run through the mod rebalance that was discussed and posted for the week? It ended up so I started in typical fashion changing absolutely everything, and then through the week just taking down feedback, scaled that back significantly, where we really ended up with two buffs, one significant needed tweak to balanced ammo, and then Gyrojet was the only one that really took a hit, losing its +3 damage. What's the feedback on the 4 changes to ballistic mods?
Well, I think the taking balance to +1 is a huge shift. I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing for ballistics, but it does take a lot of the ballistics mods out of the running for even being possible to get to 10 range. Most of your stuff, like your carnivore, your Gemini, just there's several of them. We have so many ballistic mods to begin with, but there's a ton of them that, without being on a unit that also gives a ballistic bonus with balance down to +1, can't hit 10 range anymore. Even using 3 range mods, you can't hit 10 range on it anymore. I think +2, -2 is maybe the way to go on balance personally. Gyrojet, I would kind of in agreement with several other people I've seen in chat. I'd like it to keep the +3. but increase the BIS target up to 15%. So you're essentially losing 5% more damage and also raising the value of the marksmanship merit at the same time. Everything else looked good. I would like to see maybe something bigger done with the volley adapter or the rapid feed, but it looks good the way it's changed so far as well.
So I think the intent with the ballistic is to actually make you have to sacrifice a lot to get to that 10 range. Ballistic isn't meant to always be at 10 range. Is that correct?
Dog, you nailed it. That was really the problem I was trying to make you have to solve if you were dealing with ballistics, or if you were building a ballistics arm.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And I kind of like that. I like. I mean, 10 range is kind of missiles thing. Energy is obviously short range, and then ballistic should be somewhere in between.
Yeah, that was especially looking at balanced with that between balanced and gyrojet. The +6 range meant pretty much you didn't even have to think to get any pretty much any ballistic gun to 10 range. And that really wasn't what I intended for these weapons. I really want you to struggle on ballistics to get it to max range, and I want you to even feel like, well, I got it to 9 range. I can really strip this thing down if I want to get it to 10, or I'm happy with the DPS, and I'm just going to have to maneuver a little differently to shoot at 9 than shoot at 10. Yeah, the thing about adding the plus damage to Gyrojet is now this mod is working against itself, because the mod as it stands takes away 10% of your DPS. Okay, put that in your head. But it gives you +5 damage per weapon. So I'm losing DPS and I'm gaining DPS. And it's very easy to rig that so that basically it's not even, you're not even losing DPS, you're just gaining slightly less DPS. But that's just muddying the waters.
Well, it's +3 damage, but the issue really is that with so much damage reduction in the game, taking away some of the damage bonuses to at least get the number up high enough to get through damage reduction is where we're getting hurt. With balanced ammo being a negative and so many other things having a negative factor, even with the 10% miss target, at least when it does hit, you were getting that high enough damage number that you're getting through BD2, Porcupine, Battle Axe for damage reduction, Tune damage reduction, damage command reduction. You got at least a 21 plus damage hit when it does hit, so that you're doing enough to maybe do 1 or 2 points of damage.
Well, but I don't want to tune the game around what I think, because one bad weapon or one bad mod can distort so many other things, and I believe that's what Gyrojet and Balance kind of did. Is they kind of leaned into other mechanics that were broken, and instead of addressing, well, hey, some of this stuff is probably a little too tanky, it was, well, let's just give ballistics a little more damage, and then they can punch at the level they need to punch at. Oh, I definitely hear what you're saying, that this is going to have repercussions in other places, but I would prefer to to fix those things than to leave something that very clearly is broken, like +3 range when you're just giving up a damage. That warps all the other ballistic mods. And then once you fix that and you look at Gyrojet, you're like, well, why is Gyrojet giving plus damage when it's also taking away damage? And it also, the premium for range on ballistics is pretty clear once you fix balanced ammo, because now Gyrojet is the only one giving +3 range. So you can really hone in on, well, why is it also giving damage if the sacrifice you make for all that bonus range on Gyrojet is losing 10% of your DPS?
I mean, I see that side of the argument on it. It's just, uh, it seems like there's going to have to be a lot of other modifications made to other things in the game. And I'm not saying those things don't need to be modified or changed as well. it is going to have a lot of other repercussions. I think the current factor of having the 10% miss target or even increasing that to 15% um, makes kind of the marksmanship have a value and makes other things have a value because now you're re-rolling on that miss target. So even though you've lost that DPS, you have a chance to get it back. And Gyrojet is a tier 5 mod. You have to build 4 other things to get up to it. So I don't see why we have to make the last struck sets of items that we get kind of worse in their own way rather than just, okay, hey, we're 6 struck sets deep. Let's go ahead and make a good mod. We continuously seem to add nerfs to mods or like negative factors to mods because we don't want them to be too overpowered, but we keep stacking them on top of each other as well. So they should be way better than the first one that we get built. Should be way better than the simple, the balanced.
Right, but I think, I mean, for me, when I'm looking at a game and thinking about interesting choices, if there's some item in the game that's clearly better than everything else and it removes all choice, it's it's not an interesting mechanic. You know, if you've got, so that's where balanced is, and I feel also like once you fix balanced, Gyrojet becomes the new balanced. So it just makes sense to deal with them both at the same time. Like if you're running ballistics, ballistics are built so they're underranged for what they do. So naturally, you're like, well, I need to throw range on these things. And before it was balanced. It was I'm trading 1 damage, which is negligible, and I'm getting 3 range. Like I'm basically fixing my range problems for all my ballistics, and that didn't make a lot of sense. So that had to be fixed. I mean, that was just screaming to be fixed. And once you fix that, you're going hunting for something else that's 3 ranged. And the only thing that's left is Gyrojet.
Gyrojet also doesn't work with every weapon.
Yeah, I was
Right?
gonna say,
Like
Gyrojet also has an effect type, so you can't use it
Yeah.
on several units and can't use it in combination with several other mods. Like Sable and EMP don't work with Gyrojet. The Leopard doesn't work with Gyrojet. There's Snipe doesn't work with Gyrojet. There's several mods, units, and things in the game that just simply doesn't work at all.
Right.
But I mean, you know, Gatlingers, it's still kind of a bread and butter mod that just does way too much. There's no balancing factor when a mod is giving you range and damage, and the drawback that's inherent in the mod is also being broken by the mod because the mod is giving you the very thing it's taking away.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It seems like it was almost never even worth it to take those other mods because Gyro was so good. So Gyro almost seemed mandatory, and it was just killing the what's the word?
Variety. Yeah, I hear the point about like it's definitely, I understand the side of it as a player. Like you kind of have your setups, you've got the numbers all tuned in. You spend a lot of time, you know, getting this exactly where you want it, and then I'm going to drop it and be like, nope, you got to rethink everything. That sucks. I completely understand and see the point of like from as a player, that's not fun. But I feel like what's interesting, exciting about DropShock Tiny Wars is thinking about all the different mods and giving them a place so that you're envisioning different scenarios, and maybe that's opening up like, oh, maybe I do want to trade a little bit of range for a nice damage boost here. And with balanced and gyro the way they are, they just distort that field so much that they're the only things you choose, and you don't have to make interesting choices when it comes to building out your units because you're going to slap balanced on it. It's still not at 10. Okay, slap gyro on it, and I'm getting the range, I'm getting the damage boost as well. Cool, I'm good. So I understand from a player standpoint the frustration of a nerf like this. At the same time, like balance was just so broken it had to change. And then once you make the change to balanced, gyro is an enormous standout. And this stuff isn't set in stone. If we find a huge problem with this, I'm happy to go back and revisit it. But like after kind of all the crazy changes I wanted to make and tuning it down to basically 2 buffs, 2 nerfs, that does seem to really put ballistic back where I envisioned it going, where you've got a gun type that performs across all the ranges. You don't have to worry about what range you're shooting at. What you do have to struggle with is getting that gun pushed all the way out to shoot at 10 range.
I mean, I'd be fine with not having to focus on getting it to 10 range. The issue is that I'm trying to convey here is that we keep saying that GyroJet is super broken because it did this and it contradicted itself, and then balance gave you the same effect with only -1 damage. The real issue is that you have several units. I mean, the vast majority of the game, percentage wise, is ballistic. Like there's 3 missile mods people use. There's 3 missile units people use, except for Dog and his wolfhounds. But there's not any other real variety in the game other than the variety ballistics has.
Right, and that's why I wanted to go. So this week, I've got missile written up, and there are quite a few changes to missile I want to suggest, and I completely hear the point. Like, yeah, I think ballistic, because it was so easy to manage, and the other mods really weren't as appealing as a result. It left us in this place where kind of the meta gravitated towards ballistic because it was the easiest to kind of get yourself a really solid fighting army. But I would rather, and I know, like, from a player standpoint, this sucks, like having to go through balances and changes and tweaks, and that's really the heart of why I think these conversations are important. But getting this right opens up so many more opportunities for the game. And really, the whole point of Tiny Wars Drop Shock was to allow you to kind of think of one unit and maybe think of a way to use it that other people weren't, by looking at this entire encyclopedia of abilities and mods and ways you could tweak and tune the unit, and making it kind of slightly your own in a way, at least until other people figured it out and started copying you. So that's really what I want to chase, and I think the meta can catch up.
Hey, sorry, I without just continuing the conversation, I jumped in quite late to this. I think from a ballistic perspective as well, as someone that attacks bases a lot, ballistic's my go-to when it comes to attacking, and I would sooner take an extra space of range over 30% damage increase, even more, because my damage is useless if I can't reach it. So I think we need to damage and or ammo and range isn't like a 30-30-30 split. I think I care 95% of the time over range and 5% of the time over my output, because I can always buff my output up with spam or a commander. You can't increase your range by any other way except from a mod, and even a merit, because it's ballistic. So I think doing this will create quite a hard cap, and I think we need to consider that range is king. And I think we need to kind of consider that there should be, if variety of the spice of life, I would love to see 2 ballistic, depending if we've got 6 ballistic mods, 2 that provide 1 range, 2 that provide 2 range, and 2 that provide 3 with different tweaks in and out. And I think that just keeps, if we're looking to just buffer, as PK says, buffer Leo that already has an effect, we've got something we can look at in the 1, 2, and 3 range. If you want to go GATs and you want to go heavy, there's something to play with in everywhere. And I feel like that could be something we could start with. Equally, Frizz, I know you've already got it all written up, but I just think maybe we're not looking at how important range is, or maybe it hasn't been conveyed to you.
No, when we started this, it was discussed how important range is. No, and hopefully I've kept stating that, when I kind of thought up going with the 3 weapon types and thought about how to balance them, it was this idea that, with ballistics, the ammo was going to be a little tricky, but what your real struggle, if you were dealing with ballistics, was going to be getting that range out to max. With missile, it's going to be really easy to deal with range, but the damage is going to be on the lower side. And so you're going to be doing less damage, but you aren't really going to have to worry about range. And also, then we threw in the 2-hit bonuses and things like that. in energy, you get into this extra mechanic of recharge and have to managing the recharge of the unit, and then also that you're doing most of your damage at point blank, and that it's scaling off as you're firing further and further out. And so to have, and I feel like missile and energy both do that very well, and I think that's why they're sort of weaker, I think, when compared to ballistic, because the one weakness of ballistic has really been sidestepped for so long that it's, in comparison to the other two weapon types, there's ballistic is top tier, and I feel like missile and energy are slightly under it, because ballistic's drawback has just been so easily bypassed for so long.
I would say that missile has changed to number one since the 20% optimal range increase. I've ever since that change, and that was an amazing change. Ever since that put missile on par, if not higher. So now claymores can trade with GATs, which we never had before, and that's amazing. And with the CE limit now, ballistic specifically are quite a high CE unit. So GATs which is your go-to. You know, BA3, so it's an okay CE modifier, but GATs are 80% of the ballistics dropped, and that took a huge hit. So you can mod up the better part of a good army of claymores without Mark of the Commander, but you definitely need to run Mark of the Commander on a GAT, so that then lends to you effectively fighting with 3 slots to double up then what would seem to be a ballistic nerf or rework or tweak. I just feel like you'd be pushing the gap between missile and ballistic. I do, however, agree. I'm not saying we should keep it to where it is and the same. I just think that we need to be wary of what this might push ballistic below, because if I'm fighting a base, I go with ballistic because, as you say, it's all round. It's kind of, I can chuck it at 9 to 10 range. It's kind of tanky. If we struggle to get to 10 range, missiles are just going to chew up any type of base attack, because missiles can kite energy. You don't attack with missiles because they're so kind of squishy. So I feel like base attacks might get a little bit more, will kind of be ran away from more so than usual if ballistics aren't your kind of go-to tanks.
Okay. I just want to kind of I feel like this was never, so many things were added to the game, and little tweaks were made here and there, but in terms of really taking a pass and looking at, all right, we're going to take a look at ballistics, and we're really going to make this make sense, and then doing the same for missile and doing the same for energy. And once everything has some kind of foundation to it, and we say, okay, all this makes sense, what do the fights look like? Then we can start kind of moving numbers around. But kind of, I want to hit that foundation first, acknowledging that it is probably going to create some pain points and some weird steps in the meta. But you know, my feeling is the only constant is change. I understand that in a game that's really painful and frustrating and not liked, but I feel like this, I don't want to make a change that I feel in the end is really going to bring us into a better place for balance, just because for right now so much of the play and meta is built around something that in my mind is inherently broken, and we can fix the broken thing, look at ballistics as a whole, and then say, okay, you know, ballistics actually were underperforming. There was one mod that was doing the workhorse for ballistics, but actually ballistics should be a good choice for weapon, because as a whole the platform does what you want it to do, or you know, you're able to work around the disadvantages of it. You know, having a game where there's one mod out of nearly 200 that actually makes a weapon system usable, that doesn't, in my mind, that doesn't open up interesting choices, and that really kind of speaks to the game being off kilter and not being in a good place.
As far as ballistics dominating, how much is that just the base stats of the GAT? Like, honestly, I can't really think of on any other unit besides the GAT and the BA3 that really dominate ballistics.
We see some sentries too. Let's pull them up.
Yeah, I mean, tuned units would change that. You've got BA1 and sentries coming into the mix, and Leo's being used for shacking, but I think that might skew the data if that's being pulled, in terms of a proper PvP perspective.
Yeah, the thing with sentries is they actually have like a drawback. Like the Gats, really only their drawback is their speed. Once they're in range of something, they've got HP, they've got damage, they've got range. They kind of have everything.
Yeah, and you can make him go faster with commands, so speed isn't really much of a drawback.
Yeah, it's 6 range, 10 damage, 4 guns on the Gat.
I don't think the unit itself has anything really broken about it. I think it's fairly balanced, especially with the CE changes now. My only concern is with the lower range ballistics. There's a lot of random lower range ballistic units that I've used. We use prowlers. There's in simple mods or in simple units when there's arenas or when we had the planets, there were lots of ballistic units that were used. The battle axe and the battle axe 2 have seen tons of combat over the years. The battle axe 2 is actually pretty decent. The battle axe 1's good. It's got 5 controlled, 7 max move. I mean, that's a great little skirmish unit, especially with its auto repair. The problem, like I said, the only thing I'm trying to express as a problem is if balance is taken down to +1, and even with balanced and SGA, you're going to get that +3, and that's the only setup you could use to get +3 range to also be able to use an effect like EMP or Sabo, or if the unit has an effect, you can only use those 2 mods in combination. So you're kind of bottlenecking your mod setups and your possible layouts to 2 other things. You're going to still go for the range. So now you have to use 2 mods instead of 1 to get 3 range, and you have no other diversity in your mod setup anymore because you're going to take at least Pro Max on a battle axe, or you're going to take at least High Tower on a shield unit. So now you've got 1 mod to pick from for your actual diversity on the battlefield. I would rather see us go the opposite direction to where you didn't have to be so reliant on using 2 and 3 mods to get range. So you could diversify your setups with different mods. Like if I want to run Gyrojet Long Gun, or if I want to run a Gemini, or if I want to run something else, it's not so difficult to make these mod choices because I'm not wasting 2 to 3 mod slots just to get my range up.
Yeah, but I also wonder. But you talked about sort of range as king and like how you needed to get your range up. I also wonder how much of the buff we gave to missiles was because ballistics had distorted range so much, because missiles can hit far out, but in order to get them to punch at the level that ballistics did, we had to give them that damage boost. If suddenly ballistics are fighting for that 10 range, maybe that means that missiles can come back in, because that was kind of a band-aid, because missiles, there was something broken about missiles with ballistics doing so well at all range. Now suddenly if ballistics don't, maybe that puts missiles in a better place too.
I mean, I'm all for trying things. I love change. I like to, let's break it and fix it later kind of thing. I just want to make sure I've expressed it so that if everything burns later, I can say I told you so.
Yep, you got to get that in. No, I mean, you guys are playing the game. I'm kind of at 10,000 feet above that, trying to just watch all of it and ask, what would make this fun and interesting. And I hear the point that maybe this has completely the opposite effect. This makes things less fun because now suddenly you're fighting so hard to hit range, or units that were viable now aren't. But there's especially with games, there's so many ways that we can kind of cut and slice this. Maybe the answer is going the other way, in that the as I had mentioned, the buff that we gave missiles to kind of get them up to ballistic specs, maybe that's the level we need to be at instead. Maybe they were fine with their 2 hit bonus and they didn't need a damage bonus. We just needed to add a little bit of sanity on the side of ballistics. I would rather, instead of kind of taking something that to me feels inherently broken and putting a lot of band-aids around it, fix the broken thing and then ask if we can remove the band-aids.
I think the reason we all kind of requested the missile buff is more so for the fact that there's so much damage reduction in the game. Missiles just don't work. They do 10 to 15 damage on your average missile, some of them even less. So you can easily negate that. You can easily negate 10 damage. That's nothing to negate 10 damage. So now you're looking at using 40 units that are dealing about 20 damage total with all their weapons. So you do 200 damage. With all 40 units, with having 4 weapons each, you can do 800 damage. Congratulations, you're taking 4 gats out of turn. Missiles just significantly underpowered in what they bring to the battlefield compared to both ballistic and energy. Energy, yeah, you got to get a little close, but it's not that hard to do with like a power hydraulic that kind of dim, or even the katana's actais for +4/+4. You can jump on top of some missile units. You can jump on top of some ballistic units and get in there to fight with energy. Ballistic was being beat up, or was some ballistic units were being beat up by the fact that missiles can get out to 10 range, but at the same time you're constantly kiting, constantly running, and having to pick off one unit every 2 to 3 turns because you had no damage output. So now while you're kiting with that 20%, you're at least hitting for about 10 after damage reduction, and that's manageable. You can actually kill things with 10 damage. You can't kill anything with 5 to 7.
Fridge, just sorry. No, sorry. You respond to that, and I was just going to kind of shift it a bit.
Oh, no, my response is you go first because you'll see.
Okay, I was going to suggest what PK said isn't wrong by any means. I'm not saying anything in terms of that. I was thinking more, can we just push this out? Just because I know we're 45 minutes in. Why don't we push this out, and then we can always hotfix the 20% increase throughout the week, but then in 1 week we go, okay, based off the fighting, are we going to get rid of this 20% buff? Or has this shown, because a lot of the conversation of once you're starting to tear gyro back, everyone's going with that underused unit. Could we then potentially look at a underused ballistic unit overhaul or tweak or something like that? Because, as you say, fixing the issue of ballistics were too big, so we buffed missile. Now you're pulling back ballistics, we might need to pull back missile. Maybe we then look at other units that are a bit more available to the mods. Then the mod changes are kind of a bit more irrelevant because we have the pick of 5 units. I personally, and I think everyone's had a quick look, I wanted to move away from GATs, so I sat and I was like, have we got a mid-tier shield-based unit that we can go? Like, you haven't. You've got the GAT, the Dragoon, the Sentry. That's it in terms of shield-based units. You've got like the Parata and Leo, and you can play around with them, but really you don't have a mid-range unit. So there is a bit of a gap with ballistic, but because it was just 10 Rangers King, you can get it to 10 quite easily, you win. So I think, why don't we just push this change, and then we can feed everything back to you in a week, and then just kind of push the needle as and when, because it's been about 8 years since we've had changes. I'm all good for changes. Let's just get it going. And as PK said, let's just break it and feed back data. We fed back enough to the katana when it did an ungodly amount of damage, and that was fixed quite quick. So we can just feed you info.
Okay.
Yeah, break the meta.
I'm all for that. Yeah, I'm definitely I'm a break quick, fix quick. Is really how I like to do things.
If I may, Nisius had a really good point that you wanted the missiles to be like the long range units, and right now missiles go over 10 range, but every other thing does. Like, you have ballistics that are over 10 range, you have lasers that are over 10.
Yeah, I want missiles to have the easiest time hitting at max range, but the problem is if we had missiles having an easy time hitting and gave them ungodly range, then, as we've already said, range is king. So by sort of turning that mechanic on its head and saying, okay, missiles hit really well at max range, but these things that don't have that advantage can push past max range, adds a little bit of self-balance to it. I hear what you're saying in that from a like a just straight explaining the game standpoint, it's confusing. That like, oh, missiles are good at range, but everything else can go past max range. There is something confusing to that.
Well, I mean, missiles also don't really deal as much damage as the other weapon types, which is, I guess what's confusing about them having a max of 10 range.
I would disagree. I'd say the output on the Claymore is more than anything apart from an up close supernova. You can get 20 like low 20s, even maybe 25 or so, like damage at 10 range with a well modded Claymore. They're you can hit low 20s really easily. Obviously, easily being a Berserker Eagle Eye crew, which I know is we're all at end game, so obviously all the customization of merits we've got. But I would say 10 range Claymore can currently outshoot a 10 range in damage and a 10 range gap. So we need to. I don't believe that missiles are weak by their damage. They're just squishy, which is fine. We shouldn't have it apart from the Wyvern, which is slow. We shouldn't have a tank missile platform. So yeah, I'm kind of fine with where it is. Freeze, do you have any data to look at the most dropped unit in terms of? I don't know if that's as quite niche in terms of PvP, but I assume it would be the Claymore since the change.
I do actually. I have to kind of pull all that and aggregate it, but the server does track the number of units dropped, and I've used that in the past to kind of buff units that nobody was dropping. So we can definitely pull that into the conversation. I'll just need to kind of massage the data to get it presentable before we head down that path. But that's definitely a great lever for us to see what people are actually bringing into fights. So to kind of keep this rolling and off of Peace's comment about missiles, I did want to have a conversation about missile mods and missile weapon mods as well, because when I looked at missiles, there was a missile weapon mod, the cluster missile pod, that immediately stood out in the way that the ballistic ammo mod stood out, or the balanced ammo mod stood out. But in this case, my initial pass was just to nerf it, and I so hang on, I'm going to post this first, and then I'm going to, while you guys are reading, I'm going to try to go through my thought process. So, all right. Those are the suggested missile changes. Like last week, I'm starting big, and then I think we can kind of hone this in. I do think that missile needs a little more love than ballistics. Just kind of when I got everything up and sort of looked at where things were at, it did feel like the common complaint is that missiles are just underperforming. And when I pulled this, I could kind of see why. There's a couple mods that really don't do anything for missiles. Smart warheads, guided warheads are just kind of they were just there, and they sort of limped out with expansions with barely a half thought. I wanted to kind of give them a little more oomph this time around, maybe make a bit more of a compelling case to use them. On the cluster missile pod and cluster missiles, they borrowed the miss target mechanic that ballistics and gyrojet started, and it just got pasted into cluster missiles. When I took a hard look at that and kind of how I envisioned missiles to work, I realized it was a missed opportunity to do something a little more interesting with missiles. So I've actually completely reworked that mechanic, and it ended up being a slight nerf to cluster missiles. But in fact, if you use them the way missiles are intended, you end up doing more damage with this new mechanic. You go from 8 damage to 9 damage. If you're hitting at max range. So that's the new mechanic here with cluster missiles, is going to be if you're able to hit a target at max range, and max range would be, so if you're range 5, max range would be 9 or 10. If you're range 4, max range would be 7 or 8. If you're able to hit a target in that window, you get bonus damage. And that plays into missiles being able to fight at this longer range, and then getting a nice, if you're able to position a target with missiles, you're going to get rewarded, and cluster missiles are kind of the direction with that. Smart warheads now, instead of just that plus range, they're also doing a little bit of damage. Guided warheads now, instead of being this like trading range for damage, are just a straight range plus, because with missiles, I didn't really want a you shouldn't have to really sacrifice to get range with missiles. Like if you're dealing missiles, you can close your eyes and you can get range out of it. That's not what you're having to work for in missiles. With missiles, you're having to work to get that damage, and that's why with cluster missiles, suddenly it was like, oh yeah, well let's reward what they're supposed to do. The onslaught and incursion, oh boy, those were in really bad spots. The cluster missile pod fed into that. Once I tweaked that, I took a pass at the incursion launcher and the onslaught launcher, and I was able to buff both of those. I'm probably going to put those in game right away because they're just straight buffs to those. Sabot launcher not non-unique. Let's pull those stats really quick and see what that would look like in game, because this just my glance at this feels like I don't know if anything got nerfed at this. Technically, cluster missile pod is maybe a nerf, but actually it's a buff because there are cases where it's doing more damage. I don't know if this change set contains any nerfs.
No,
Just a-
I actually have to kind of say I like everything on here so far. The explosive being -2 is kind of an oof to me because I use the explosive missiles a lot as is, but the extra damage kind of makes that worthwhile. And I agree with the Sable launcher being non-unique. We did it a lot with like the mag cannon and rail and several other things. I think it should have been non-unique a while ago. It's not that OP in itself.
Just a quick one. As it stands right now, cluster missile pod. If you add cluster missiles, it doesn't get an extra 3 damage. Is that correct?
Oh, if you had a cluster missile pod
If
and
you
you put cluster missiles on it.
Yeah, you don't get +1 range, +3 damage, do you? Is that right? Because it already has it. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a weapon effect.
Yeah, I was just making sure of that because confusing to me. I never drop cluster missile pod because it's effectively a cheaper incursion. If you run cluster missiles with incursion, it's cheaper because obviously the cost of the mod. So I'm actually quite shocked that people run missile pod just as more as a comment rather than your data is incorrect because data's data. But I'm just thinking out loud. Maybe the reason people do it is because they don't run Eagle Eye Cruise. But yeah, I'm really shocked. And in just off an off comment, how that data is so high. But yeah, it's really interesting.
Explosive missiles causing damage to stacking. Oh boy, AOE damage is really a scary thing in this game because it would be so easy to get that wrong and just have army fights be an absolute disaster. So I've tried to be really careful about anything that's AOE in the game because if there's anything that has the potential to just ruin army fights, it's AOE damage.
Frizz, what's your logic on only EMP missiles having 150% shield damage, however, Sabot moving up to 175? Because I think I think that could move to 175. Reason being is missiles hit last, so there's a good chance that they would hit armor if you're shooting with team members. So I think that could lend to going to 175 because currently that's not getting any change.
Okay, so maybe we leave Sabot missiles as 150, and we give EMP missiles the 175 here because that plays more to the ability to how you're going to get that damage. Because if you're firing Sabot missiles, because as you said they're hitting last, you're more likely to get that armor damage.
I mean, personally, I would only ever run Sabot missiles if there's a BA family down. You wouldn't want to run it any other way because it would just atone to overkill on other shielded units. But I'm thinking more. I know PK runs EMP missiles, and I think in the nicest way, this is not an insult. He's the only guy that I know that does run it. So obviously he runs it on Wyverns or has in previously. So I would say if he's running that and he's choosing to opt out of cluster missiles, I would say that I don't know. Actually, now you've got guided warheads and other ones to move them up. Potentially, it might not need a change. I might be talking out of my ass rather than getting data first.
Okay, and yeah, really, it looked like EMP already had a place in the game because there are just so many. Pretty much everything has shields except for the Battle Axe family. So if you're dropping EMP, you're gaining 50% damage. You're losing 25% damage. But because most things have more shields than armor, that's a net of you having more DPS. So I think people can pretty easily make that calculation. Sabot is trickier because it is more of a one-trick pony. It is kind of a battle axe killer. So that was why I'm tending to lean towards giving that a bit more of a bump, because you are trading a lot of that good shield damage that pretty much every unit has to really hit hard when you get down to armor.
Quick question: Is cluster missiles the new update that you're proposing? Will that put a like a category on that damage?
Sorry, Gear, you're a little quiet. Can you
Oh,
can you
sorry.
do that again?
I was just saying, if you put cluster missiles with your new proposed suggestion, would that put a damage category on that missile then, or is that going to be open? So this if max range, is that going to be a category?
It means that'd be like a weapon effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna be cluster. So I'll probably change like the miss target on the gyro to just say gyro weapons, because that's what they are. They're firing gyro rounds, and these will be cluster rounds. And so the gyro rounds will have the chance of miss target, and the cluster rounds will have the bonus damage at max range.
Okay.
Does this mean we're going to move miss target over to the dodge mechanic?
Oh well, we're gonna have a dodge conversation now, huh?
Please no. Please no.
Did I hear dodge conversation?
Yeah.
Um,
the dodge conversation is what we're doing.
What's everyone's thoughts on armor-piercing missiles maybe getting +2 damage? Just because it might be the same thing as Sabot. If you really specialize in assuming someone's going to run MD2, you want to make sure you're just getting a little bit of base damage if they're not, so you can still be kind of useful. What's everyone's thoughts on that?
I mean, I wouldn't mind instead of them getting the +2 if it ignored the damage reduction, and since they're armor piercing, when we rework the crit table and how critical hits work, we could have armor piercing apply an additional crit effect or increase crit percentages maybe.
What about a change now? Because that sounds like a faraway change.
Well, darn you.
+2? What's everyone's thoughts on that? Frizz, sorry, as well. Maybe you've agreed to +1 and we're that's not going to change. But what do you think?
So kind of after this pass and sort of being able, so this was once I kind of looked at cluster missiles and made the realization about changing their mechanic, a lot of buffs flowed from that. I didn't look at armor piercing missiles after I kind of modified smart warheads and the guided warheads. So the only thing that it's competing with then is explosive missiles, which just got bumped to 4 damage. And so plus I'm not opposed to +2 unless someone wants to make an argument that maybe this is going a little too far with missiles. There was also a chat comment by Facehurt asking about cluster versus incursion. So yeah, I saw that. I did that intentionally. So now incursion and cluster kind of play off each other in terms of which one you want to pick. With the incursion, now you're getting that 7 range across all your damage. So that's guaranteed damage. You're going cluster if you're saying, okay, I'm going to gamble that I can hit more of my shots at max range. So you're taking lower base damage and you're relying on that bonus damage to put you over the incursion. And I liked how suddenly now you could either play it safe with the incursion and take that slightly lower base damage, but know you're always going to push at 7, or you could go cluster while trading off that you now had a weapon type on there and possibly go to 9 damage.
You've missed sorry, Diego.
I was just going to say, but the reason I've never run cluster missile pod is because you can't put cluster missile pod and cluster missiles on the same unit. Is that going to be the same case going forward with this? Because you won't get the bonus.
Right. Well, but now you can run the incursion and the cluster missile pods, and you're actually going to be pushing a little more damage. And in my mind, I like that because you're doing the same thing with 2 mod slots, and you're counting on a knock-on effect to get more damage, right? So if you've got 1 slot left and you just want to be able to push a little more damage, you're probably going to lean cluster missile pod. If you're building the unit from scratch and you have a lot of mod slots to work with, then you're probably thinking incursion plus cluster missiles, because that's giving you more damage than just a cluster missile pod, and you're modifying all the other missile weapons on the unit.
Frizz, just a quick one. You've missed Zeus off of this. I always envisaged that as the brother of the Neptune, so I would love to see that as like a 15, 16 damage because you have a heavy controlled offset. Maybe even reduce the ammo down to like 4, like really like heavy hitter that's kind of like really low ammo, not built to sustain. So if I chose to put it on my claymores in a base defense, it would be over in 4 turns and it wouldn't shoot anymore unless I re-armored or had pack rat or M variant. Did you miss that by accident, or are you looking to rework that further?
The Zeus seemed a little trickier because it is, and I also felt like does anyone run Zeus? I felt people run Neptune, but I feel like
Chubbs ran it once when he runs full damage clays, so he'll run cluster pod, cluster incursion Zeus, and he runs it with claymores, with wyverns as well, and that's the only time I've seen them. And yeah, so that's kind of it.
Yeah, the only time I've seen them used recently is when people drop like 20 LEs, they'll use the Zeus because it's already at 10 range for like training crews. That's the only use I see out of it. I don't ever, in all the PvP fights we've had, I think maybe 1 in 20 units if I salvaged a Zeus off of the mod layouts for a unit type. I think it either needs a big bonus and damage or it needs some sort of new effect.
Yeah, the Zeus is already in a weird place and trying to make you do something very specific. So no controlled speed means you can't move, or you have to move very slowly. And then for that, you're getting a 14 damage, 5 range missile attack, which is pretty much one of the most powerful in the game. I'd rather, it's so specialized. I'd rather get the normally run missile weapons and missile mods in a good spot, and then ask, okay, what does the Zeus need to kind of make it more specialized? Because
that's fine.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I think the reason why we don't pick it, the control speed can be worked around, especially if you run steady hand crews or a dim with claymores. I think that's fine. And the to hit now with Whitmans and tracking station and stacking is so mad. That's not a problem. I think the problem is the multiplier of incursion and triad you can get way better damage using cluster or explosive with an incursion, a cluster, pod, or triad, rather than you can't really buff the damage too much.
Yeah, I would say with the new changes, incursion with a D variant or berserker by itself gets you more damage than a Zeus.
But maybe we correct, the pillars of missile. Here are the 4 pillars that we know are the options, and then the second tier options where you want to get a bit fancy can be APM, Zeus, and all these other ones. So I'm not pushing for a Zeus change now, but as long as it's kind of there once we get the pillars sorted, I think that's good. Or we can make it 20 damage. I'm good either way.
Wasn't it originally 19 or 20? I feel like
it was around the same as the Neptune. It was definitely like 18 to 20.
Yeah,
and then I think
it was 1 point different than the Neptune originally. And it
yeah,
got nerfed at some point, I think.
All right. Why don't I'll throw a token, maybe 2 extra damage on the Zeus with this, and we can always slate it for some additional work once we feel like missiles are everything else in missiles is working the way we want it to. Does that sound?
Yeah, I think that'd be really good. Maybe one thing we could do which fixes it. -5 controlled is always such a weird number. Maybe if we made it -3, where it almost negated a steady hand, that could make it a bit more desirable to people when they're, I want the damage, so I'll run my steady hand crews knowing that it kind of negates the merit, but I get a really strong missile. So that could be a conversation for another time, but that might be a way to make it more viable, because -5 controlled is a very odd number to kind of fix. It's almost like you need to run face north, but no one would run face north, if that makes sense.
I run face north.
I have no comment to that.
I run face north.
I still have no comment to that.
Okay, so it feels like overall, this compared to last week, this is a much easier pill to swallow. I already want to put the buffs in the game, which means incursion and onslaught will go right away. I do have to code up the effect for the cluster weapons. And I made this mistake last week. Let me post these. We'll get a suggestion thread going. If the entire overall sentiment is positive, then I can see about maybe getting these out sooner. I don't want to make the mistake I made last week where it seemed like people were okay with the ballistic change, even though there were some significant nerfs in there, and especially when we started. This is buffs. I'd say across the board. Even the cluster weapons are actually, you're getting a damage buff if you're hitting at max range. But I don't want to try to read people's minds at the same time. But I'll get these up there. I'll get the code kind of ready for the cluster mechanic. And if the overall sentiment is good, I could put these out a little earlier in the week so we can see how these changes also play with the changes that I'm going to be pushing for ballistic. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I mean, maybe by the end of the day we can get enough feedback to go and push it out. I don't have a whole lot of. I didn't see any issues with the missiles. You did a good job there. Pat yourself on the back.
All right, let's not get carried away here. Missile compared to ballistic now. I don't want to make kind of you run into that League of Legends problem where you misbalance, and now you've got a flavor of the week, the month until the next balance pass happens. Obviously, we need to see. I'm really curious to see how this plays with the ballistic changes. Obviously, I think it's gonna. There's 3 camps, right? Camp 1 is probably least likely, and that is ballistics are still really strong, especially hitting at range. I don't see that happening, but it's a possibility. Camp 2 is missiles now, with especially they're getting some. They're definitely getting some damage buffs. They're getting some more usable weapons. The mods, I think the mods across the board are getting better. Maybe, and especially with the missile band-aid that we put in the game, maybe now. Okay, we'll do RuneScape comparisons from now on. My only worry is now maybe missiles are too strong. Perhaps that band-aid that we put on to do bonus damage at max range on top of the bonus damage from max range from cluster missiles is a little too far. Maybe not. I think we have to. I think the game has to be played in order to determine that. And the third scenario, which is least likely, is somehow this puts both weapons in a really good place, and we can go on to energy, and kind of round out the balancing of the 3 weapon types.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry, just acknowledging that. I think it'll be really, really good. If we get these in, we can feed back the data to you in the next week. I think it'll be good fun. Sorry, what's next on your list, Frizz? Because I wanted to bring something up. Oh, sorry, how long do we have before you need to call this? Sorry, so we know.
I think I can go another 20 minutes or so. And we talked through ballistics. I presented missile. So yeah, we can move on to comments and questions at this point.
Just I did my fault for not putting it on the thread, but can we just quickly bring up warped crews? Because I know there's only a finite amount of people that have kind of pushed, that have got maybe 60 of them, but with the to hit not having a limit, we can hit through Thumper, we can hit on the 3rd turn of Drop Shock. So do we look to change the minus to hit on those 2 areas and various other things? Because right now you can't, with a tuned Lightfoot and warped crews, you can't dodge. Even as AO1, Iron is very difficult to cap. Rusty or not, it was quite easy to cap him. I'm not berating him in a certain way, but before an AO1 could dodge their way around, but if you kind of run warped crews with a couple of targeting mods, you are going to hit them no matter what. So you run 12, you're going to outdamage whatever they can reduce. So do you think there could be a way that we could look at warped crews? Because I feel like the people that have been farming Aldous, yes, they should get a reward, but they shouldn't be able to jump in and hit through Thumper with guaranteed 1st turn. I feel like that's quite too overpowered. Ian, I'm really sorry you're not Rusty. Apologies.
No, you're fine, man.
Man, calling out Iron. The guy comes back and he's already getting nagged.
I don't think the problem was with Warp Cruise. It's the hit system itself. Warp Cruise only add +1. There's a lot other bonuses other way in other places.
Yeah, maybe that
So-
tips the scale. Yeah.
Well, so they add +1 gunnery level, but each gunnery level adds +3 to hit.
That's madness.
So it's like worth 1.5 like ATL.
So it all breaks down to let me pull up the 2-hit code, but it's each gunnery level is broken up into every time you gain a gunnery level, you're actually gaining +3, the actual like numbers under the scenes or behind the scenes. And when we say like levels of dodge, the same thing. Like if your one dodge level is actually -3 to hit. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So ATL would be +6 essentially if it's +2 gunnery.
Yes. If you see,
so Warp Crews aren't as overpowered as you would expect. They kind of just add to it. I think the bigger thing is there's just so many 2-hit buffs in the game that it's easy to just hit through Thumper and Drop Shock, and I think those two things need to be buffed. But other than that, the only other problem I see is Commanders dodging.
I think, yeah, sorry, I'm not saying, sorry, apologies, Warp Crews aren't the issue, but I think Warp Crews, with the ability of the Whitman, the ATL, improved aim shot, that has tipped the scale to allow you to hit through. So it's like everything dodge and Thumper has a ceiling. It's enabled you to kind of peek over that ceiling a little bit. I'm not saying specifically that's the problem, but that in itself has just caused you to get an overwhelm. You can get, now we know it's 1 to 3 gunner levels, you can get +15 to hit really easily. So it's kind of causing other mechanics not to work very well. So maybe that calls for a system overhaul, but I kind of never like the idea of that because that's a lot of work.
yeah, well, I mean, and Dog pointed out, so like Deep Sensor's their to hit bonus was never working properly, and that should have been 3 additional gunnery levels to hit. That I think if that was actually working in the game and working properly, it would have been madness because everything would have been hitting everything all the time. So maybe in a way we dodged a bullet that my development skills are so crummy that I couldn't even make that work properly. But now you have the Night Stalker gets the +3 gunnery levels, and Deep Sensor, the other ones have kind of been reduced to +1, +2 gunnery levels, but all of those have been fixed as well. So that may be the other, so it might be Warped Cruise, but we also now, those mechanics are fixed. So the units previously that were supposed to be giving like sector-based or faction-based plus gunnery levels to hit, that's now working like it should, and that may be the reason that we're seeing all this shooting through Drop Shock and through Thumpers is those were really balanced around thinking that those 2-hit bonuses were working when in fact they were not. And so now those 2-hit bonuses are actually working. It's probably time to go back and raise those numbers a little bit.
Yeah, because is it the first turn of Drop Shock? Forgive me, I haven't looked at it in a while, but it's something crazy like 27 levels, and then it deteriorates quite significantly. I think like by a third. I can't remember off the top of my head. I haven't looked at it recently, but by the third turn, if you stack everything right, you can hit. So yeah, something like making it where it's just flat impossible to hit always for like 4 turns. That would give base attackers a little bit easier, but especially with Dog can jump Dragoons in and pop the Thumper in the first turn, which then allows him to carry on moving. So yeah, it's quite, maybe if we were to push Drop Shock up, push Thumper up rather than removing everything, then maybe that can fix it, as you say, or at least move it in the right direction to it being fairer.
Yeah, I'd say just buff those two.
Okay.
That also, but that doesn't fix people being capped. I've been running.
Then there's the fact that we have a couple undodgeable units that shoot through damage reduction.
So maybe we need to look at. I know that's quite specific. Maybe we need to look at tuned units losing the Acti to hit because they already have the AI mod. Because we're specifically talking about tuned Lightfoots because they can do an ungodly amount of to hit because they've got +5 themselves, then aim shot, then ATL, then Whitman. You're not dodging it. And when you run 12, you're killing everything.
Have Lightfoots had any kind of place in the game before the tuned version, aside from like someone just really liking them?
They're like
Um,
skirmisher scouts.
Yeah, I used to use them a lot. Where it was first advanced unit that I used,
I,
and
I,
I stuck with it for a very long time.
Yeah, and they're kind of like the Kappa unit. They're like the ballista. They're like ballistas are kind of what you'd cap with missile, and they're kind of that variant because they've got a good 150 burst and a +2 target. Tuned units just really made them steroidy, which is okay, but I just feel like maybe there needs to, if there's no immediate change to increase the dodge amount or really tune that back, then we might need to look at specifically the Lightfoot.
Just responding to FaceHurt. I tuned units may need something at some point. Let me increase drop shock, increase thumper, and we can then kind of there's probably a conversation coming down the road about tuned units. In fact, I know there is. I put them in just as what was going to be sort of a last hurrah. Hey, let's do something crazy with drop shock and really make it really change, put everything on its head, and have something that people can have fun with as we're winding down. And instead, it turned into, oh, well, like people still want to play this game. And so maybe this ridiculous thing that I threw all the balance out the window for is now going to need some kind of real balance pass. I don't want to take away all their ridiculousness. I don't think we can make them unique. That takes all the fun out of them. There's a big risk in dropping them because you have to spend a lot of time getting them. You have to get the right ones. Then you have to build your army around them. So the nice part about drop shock is because when you deploy something, you're risking it. That adds some inherent balance to the game. Let's take a look. Let's take a little deeper look into the Lightfoot and just see how bad it is. And maybe it needs just a quick tweak we can do here, or if it's going to get a little more involved, push to a future session.
I would say just taking if it's tuned, take the +2 acti away because it gets +3 as part of the mod. I think that would definitely move it away where maybe you could dodge it. I'd have to run the numbers and do some tests, but or we would rather, not specifically me, but maybe that might fix it. So you're getting effectively +1 gunnery level for it being tuned, but you lose the acti ability.
Yeah,
Lightfoots are relatively balanced with the exception of just the really, really high to hit. They have one, hard hitting gun, and they're decently tanky. But as far as a tune unit goes, they're far from just the plus to hit.
Well, they're also really fast. They have a really, really fast controlled speed, which is why they never miss. So.
Yeah, I mean with steady hand crews you can run 8-8, which is obscene.
They're running the AI, which is giving them 2 gunnery levels. And then they get their acti, which is another 2 gunnery levels.
I thought the tuned unit was 3. I could be wrong there.
Yeah, is it the tuned semi-sentient AI?
I think it's +2.
Yes, tuned semi-sentient AI is +2.
Yeah, the problem with the Lightfoot is you put ATL on it, and then you have the base acti, and then you have the to hit mod on it, and it becomes undodgeable. It's +6 gunnery levels to hit right there, and then you add Whitman on top of it.
So I guess maybe the tuned benefit is almost, it's like the plus acti becomes, you don't need to then micro that it gets removed and put onto the tuned unit, so it's a permanent to hit, which is quite nice. I think that's a good move in the right direction, especially because I do use the Lightfoots to jump into a base. So with that contributed towards the thumper, I think that will put them in a bit more of a less fearful place for, oh god, I'm going to get capped the first turn I drop to a base as well, rather than just not just looking at a skirmish on Konu, for example.
Yeah, the Lightfoots were capping people through thumper. It's a bit of a problem.
Sorry.
Okay. So I want to hear from anybody at all. Does anybody have a problem with for the tuned Lightfoot? It loses its target recognition acti, which is the +2 gunnery levels to hit.
Well, in the spirit of being get confrontational, sure, I do. But
I mean, if anyone right now is feeling like I love my Lightfoot, this is dumb, don't do it. I absolutely want to hear that point of view. If the
Yeah, I think. Do you want to jump on chat? Nick is saying that. Sorry to interrupt you. He's saying it's disappointing.
Okay. Don't no. There it is. Thanks, Nick. Don't nerf the TVAR. Yeah. Yeah, but so Nick, I'm just going to try to address you directly in chat. Then, if even dropping off this acti, you can still put an ATL on it and get it back to that point, or so it's ridiculous, but it. Or you're gonna have to fill a little bit while we have a conversation with Nick. I'm sure he's typing as furiously as he can.
Also, another pat on the back for us. I didn't realize you intended to break the game with Kilroy, and now it's created success. So, good job. I think he's going to jump on, boys.
leave it to Chris to be unintentionally awesome.
I know. He's like, fine, I'll come back. You want me back? I'll be back. Here's all these ridiculous units. And we're like, thanks.
This is awesome. Why didn't you do this before? I was like, oh God, I can't do anything right. I can't even break this game right.
So while Nick's waiting, we're going to address it directly. When do you think we'll get tuned units? More tuned units?
Oh, yes, I can hear you.
So,
Hi, Nick.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to make a big deal about this. I don't have a good solution, but the cool thing about the TVAR Lightfoot is if you didn't have to use ATL, you have 4 mod slots that you can add damage, you can add speed, you can do ridiculous things with. The problem with it is because you have basically a bonus ATL and you can still put ATL on it, you can break a lot of things. So if there's a way to like cap the amount of to hit that unit could get, that would be a better fix. If that's too much of a pain to do, I understand just taking off the acti and having it so that if you want to have a capper unit, you have to put ATL back on it. But it's kind of a shame to do it that way, just because then you lose a mod slot to do what it could have done if you just put an extra gun on it, if that makes sense.
I think that's the point that we're trying to balance around is you can still make it ridiculous, but now you're trading a mod slot to turn it into like that super capper versus getting that ability right out of the box.
Right, but I understand that, and if that's the easiest way to do it, I get it. But it'd be if there's a way to just cap the amount of to hit that could get, so that if you put an ATL on it, it did nothing. That would be better in my eyes. In that case, like you don't put the ATL on it, it does nothing. You don't put AOA on it, it does nothing. You have to put another gun on it, or you have to put another damage mod on it. But putting ATL on it's not going to have any effect. So now you still have a unit that has nice to hit built in, so it has all its acties, but it can't break the rest of the game.
Nick, just a quick one. I don't think Lightfoots have just the nice to hit. I think they're really heavy. I think from using Lightfoots, you don't hit with kind of average, above average. You're hitting with guaranteed. So all this will do is kind of bring that down to easy. I think that they are a lot harder than I don't think this will push Lightfoots to not be used. I think this.
No, I don't think that either. I just think it'd be a cooler fix if you could make it so. And the one thing that's broken on it is that you can stack ATL. So rather than just so you're coming at it from one way is that you're removing the mod the active that's equivalent to ATL, and that'll certainly take care of the problem. It'd be cooler if you could make the ATL irrelevant on the Lightfoot, so you don't use it. So now you have all the cool stuff on the Lightfoot, and you just have to use something else other than ATL.
So I guess
that's the only point I'm trying to make.
I guess a to hit cap then moving forward, not moving forward, but a to hit cap when we revisit dodge and to hit could be great, because dodging something shouldn't be limited when adding it can be. So maybe that could then create an overall fix for everything, which maybe I don't think that's a headache anyone wants to tackle anytime soon, but that could be, at least there's consideration for that to be fixed, because we are talking about balancing units in a bit of a wonky system at the moment. No offense, Riz. So maybe we're always looking at you know, that from a different kind of perspective because it's always uneven, if that makes sense.
I just have a quick question. So, does piloting skill add dodge? Like for every tier of piloting, does it add dodge?
No.
No, it does not. Do you
Okay.
you either dodge from moving, or it's some inherent bonus on the unit?
Gotcha. So is there a reason to get like does warped piloting do anything for you?
No, nothing at the moment.
Okay.
There may be some weird penalty around moving with low piloting and you moving within your controlled speed but not having enough piloting. I'm pretty sure there's some small penalty baked in there. I'd have to really dig into the 2-hit code, but I don't think it's enough to really change a 2-hit calculation significantly. The +3 off of the +3 to hit off of +1 gunnery level is really where warped is giving you is providing something.
Sure.
Frizz, how much of it? Forgive me, I don't know in terms of the code behind it, but how difficult would it be to just add another increase the max dodge cap by 1 more level? Is that gonna? Does everything in the game pull from a you know, one part of the code where it's like, okay, it refers to this, and we could just create another level, and then it all works? Or would that require you looking in loads of different areas and breaking everything that you don't want to break yet?
No, so let me kind of give you guys. Actually, here I'm looking at the code block right now, so I'll just post. So that is, and I even put comments in there, way back when. So this is the block that's determining the dodge portion of the 2-hit code, and it's looking at how far a unit moved, and then it's looking at if the unit has any dodge bonus. So effectively what it's saying is you can see for every 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and then above that, you are getting a 2B hit bonus. And it's going from 2 to 4 to 6, and then it's jumping from 6 to 9 when you're going from 8 squares to 9, 10 squares. And then it's going to 12 when you go above 10 squares. So if you're moving at 11 squares, you're causing an 11-point 2-hit penalty at anything shooting at you. It then compares that to your dodge modifier, and it basically checks that if your dodge modifier is higher, then you are getting the dodge bonus. If your move bonus is higher, then you're getting the move bonus, and then that's being rolled into the 2-hit number.
All right, I'm learning new. I was always told that. Sorry, yeah, Dog, you're right. I was always told that moving 9 would give you max dodge when you're like moving a low 9. I never knew that moving 11 or 12 would give you another level. That's really interesting.
Yep.
So effectively, and remember that each 3 points of 2 hit is a gunnery level. So if you're moving at 12, you are basically wiping out 4 gunnery levels. So if someone is shooting at you with a veteran crew, 4 gunnery levels, and you're moving at 11, it's the same as if you weren't moving and they were shooting at you with a rookie crew.
Would you be comfortable adding another layer in, or did you show this to show that it's easy to do, or would you just showing us the logic in terms of not changing anything?
I wanted to just kind of, so we were all talking about the same thing, and also show that it's not as simple as just upping the cap, because the cap dodge is really built around dodge is like moving when you're not moving effectively, right? And I also don't want to make a game where units are zipping around the screen and it's really hard from turn to turn to turn in your head to say, I'm shooting at this, now I'm shooting at this, now I'm shooting at this. I want those turns to kind of like things are sort of moving in, taking damage, moving out, and you're able to kind of follow how things are moving in the game. if we made another tier of like, oh, if you're moving 15 plus, you're getting this other bonus. Now suddenly the game is creating this mechanic that makes it much harder to follow battles because you're having units that are trying to zip around at 15 to get a really good penalty to be hit.
I was thinking more increasing the 2, 4, not the 2, but 4, 6, 8, and 10, just maybe by a small amount, rather than adding another layer of if you move 15, you get this reward. Because obviously, you don't want to promote people running around really quickly. But yeah, I was thinking more just buffing all the base ones you've already got. Maybe that could be a solution.
I think maybe we just move dodge over to miss target, since when you dodge something, you're getting missed.
So that's we went down that road initially, and the reason this is balanced like this is there was a point for quite some time where it was really hard to hit anybody, and battles just went forever because no shots would land. And I don't feel like that put us in a very good place in terms of gameplay. And that's why dodge got rolled into movement to because it sort of makes sense in terms of if you're balancing, it's like, okay, I'm going to make a unit that moves really fast, and so I'm going to hop him around the battlefield, and that's how I'm going to make him harder to hit. Or I've got something really slow moving, so I'm going to stack a lot of dodge on there so he acts as if he's moving very quickly. That also then sets the 2B hit penalties apart, because those are completely separate. So if you're putting a 2B hit, well, let's call it a bonus for you. It's a penalty for anyone shooting at you on your unit. You know you're getting that on top of dodge and on top of movement, and that's very powerful. And that's why I really once I was able to put these two mechanics together, it allowed that one extra mechanic to work better, because it suddenly wasn't trying to keep three things. I wasn't trying to keep three things in my head, and it created so many more situations where it was possible to break the 2-hit calculations and make unhittable units. And it also created a bonus that if there are a couple of units and a couple of things that give you that extra penalty when you're being shot at, on top of dodge and on top of movement, and it made those really shine. So I think what we probably need is a really deep dive into the 2-hit code at some point. And the 2-hit code has never been posted, right?
Not as far as I know, not the code itself.
Okay, if you're ever curious what the 2-hit code is doing, when you do an individual attack with a weapon, basically you target a unit, and then you pick a weapon, and you pick. And this is like a bazillion steps to do this. This is why nobody ever sees this. But then in the little attack panel, you pick the unit, you pick the weapon. When you submit that, a little tab is going to pop up on the bottom of the screen, and it's actually going to show you exactly the penalties and the bonuses you're receiving for that attack. And that feeds directly into the 2-hit code. That value goes to the turn processor, and if nothing else has modified the 2-hit, that's the value it's going to use when it calculates the attack. And the arrows are actually color coded by gunnery levels, so you can see, oh, this gave me a 2 gunnery level penalty hit to hit, or this gave me 3 extra gunnery levels to attack. I imagine, I don't even know if people know that's in the game, but it is.
That was actually a feature added several years down the line. There used to be no information at all. And other than trial and error and the weird wave chart we used to have in the wiki, there wasn't really any 2-hit information.
And X Hunter's done a lot of work to deconstruct 2-hit. Yeah, I think and there's a lot going on with 2-hit. I'm super hesitant to start changing things here or changing things there with it. I really like the buffing the penalties for Thumper and Drop Shock. I'll go ahead and put those in. But in terms of really pulling on different numbers on the 2-hit code, it has such enormous implications, and it's really been balanced over the years by tuning something, it completely breaking part of the game, tuning it back, it doesn't do anything for the game, and then kind of settling on a point where it works. We there's definitely a point where we need to visit it. I just don't want to kind of jump in, change one thing, and then say, oh, what does this look like?
Frizz, what proposed changes are you doing to Drop Shock and the Thumper?
We will up the penalty on those. Let's see what Thumper's at right now.
Without completely, PK, I actually want your view on this. I wanted to talk to you about it beforehand, but I was running late. What are your thoughts on Thumper giving a minus to hit if you moved, but then a softer -2 hit if you're in that quad? Because then that creates a bit of strategy around kind of taking it out. For example, if it was like 6 gunnery levels and then it was only kind of 3 if you sat still, I know that completely changes everything, and I'm all for making base assaults easier. But that, I don't know, something like that could be quite interesting. Or we could just go flat -10 or 12 and be done with it. But I kind of like the idea of adding a bit more layer of strategy towards support buildings and executing support buildings.
That should already be in the game. If you're not moving, the Thumper does not affect you.
No, I understand that. What I'm saying is it would be quite nice if you moved last turn, it was -10. If you didn't, it was like -3. So it gave you like a soft minus to hit regardless because you're attacking a base. Because what you've got at the moment is you get a dreadnought, you do a deep dive in and you sit still, and then you can clear half of the base, any enemies in range, and generally all support is in the middle. So you only need to move 5 range and then that's it. I think maybe, I'm just trying to think of a way to create a bit more strategy without altogether destroying the want to attack a base.
Yeah.
Fine.
Does anyone else have kind of feedback on the Thumper having different penalties, or
why don't you move the Slayer's suggestion to a certain amount of gunnery levels depending on how far the unit is from the Thumper? So like if you're within 10 range of the Thumper, you get like, say that -3, or if you're within 15, you get a -2. That kind of makes logical sense.
Yeah, kind of like a seismic effect, where your unit's being destabilized by the Thumper itself. And the closer you get to it, the greater the 2-hit penalty is all the time. Maybe like under 5 range or even under 7 range, the Thumper just applies a straight negative effect, like -5 gunnery levels as opposed to the 8, 10, 12, whatever we're going to make it after this update.
it's 7 gunnery level penalty on the Thumper right now. Yeah, Dog's got it.
Dog, what accuracy from memory were you hitting at with the current, when you were doing everything you can to hit through Thumper? Were you hitting, what accuracy was that? Okay, so maybe it needs to be like -12, 15 to like really make sure it does, because you don't want people even to be hitting difficult. You want it to be a hard you can't hit. Or do we want it to be a hard you can't hit? Do we want, if you jump into a base, is it brace for impact for the first turn? Because I thought that was always what it was going to be. What's everyone's thoughts on that? How do they view the first turn of jumping into a base? Is it brace for impact, or should there be an opportunity for you to get some lucky shot in?
I mean, even at near impossible, you're 1%. I don't know. I think if you're stacking all to hit and just doing everything you actually can to maximize your to hit, I don't think it should be impossible to hit something. I don't think it should be near impossible to hit something. There is the mechanic that, yeah, it should be incredibly hard, but it shouldn't be just outside of feasible reality. It shouldn't be impossible altogether. I think bases are kind of weak, but I think that's more of a building aspect, more of like the guns themselves on a base. There's not really points to using very many weapons on a base, as opposed to just stacking a crap load of phase and support, because any weapon in the game doesn't do as much damage as a well-modded simple unit. So there's no point in using a building that's going to pump out 80 damage when I can drop a might with an overload and get more damage than that.
All right, so the way it stands now, if we want to kind of get into the mechanics of the Thumper, at Severing gunnery levels, if a unit has a elite crew, they're basically their 2-hit is 0, and it's a roll of 3d6 is what it simulates when you fire. But so if you are shooting at a unit, there are no penalties, no bonuses. Your crew is elite. You always hit. Your 2-hit number is 0. The base hit number is 12, and that's subtracted from gunnery levels right off the bat. So there's 4 gunnery levels. Each level is -3. So you're going from 12 to 0. You've got a 2-hit number of 0 with your elite crew. If you move into a Thumper, you're getting a 7 gunnery level penalty. That's 21. So that's pushing you all the way to the other side. You need to roll a 21 or higher on 3 6-sided die, which you can't do. So you're not hitting with an elite crew if you're going into a Thumper. Now, if you're doing it with a Lightfoot, you're getting 2 gunnery level bonus, another 2 level with the Acti, and then 2 more with the mod. Nick, is that right?
1.5 gunnery levels with the ATL, I believe, is what it is.
Okay, for the sake of the math, let's call it 2. So that's 6. You're shifting it back 6 gunnery levels effectively. So your 2-hit number is going to be 3. You've got a 6 gunnery level penalty. You've got a 7 gunnery level penalty, a 6 gunnery level bonus. You're at 3, and you're rolling 3d6. You're guaranteed still at that point because you roll 1 1 1, and you still hit the gunnery level. And so that would actually miss because it's 1.5. But for the sake of math, we can basically call that that's probably why that's where we're at with. Okay, yeah, 3 gunnery levels as Nick posted. So if we added 2 gunnery levels to the Thumper in that calculation, we're going to shift back to 9, and that's pretty much a coin flip. You're going to need a 9 to hit on 3d6 if you're running a Lightfoot that way. Does that feel like we're in a pretty good place with the Thumper if we go plus, if we kick it up 2 gunnery levels? Or do we want to kick it up to 10?
I think we can start with 9 and kind of push it. I'd rather go higher, then we can always go lower. Because worst case scenario, I can't hit you the turn you drop. That's not the end of the world.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay, and it's still hittable if you're running ridiculous to hit, because that's going to put you at a 12. You're going to have to roll a 12 or higher on 3d6. So you're going to basically need to roll 4s, 5s, and 6s.
I think that's really good.
Okay. All right. Let me kick that up.
I know that no one uses light and medium, but are you going to scale that accordingly for light, medium, and the Shakar defense matrix? Because open conversation, the Shakar defense matrix is 5 gunnery levels, I believe, and the heavy Thumper is 7. Maybe I think because it's lower, maybe we should match those because the defense matrix is unique. You can only drop 1 per planet, yet you can drop 5 Thumpers in one base, so an unlimited amount. So maybe we need to look at making the Shakar just that 1 gunnery level better than the human variant because it's unique. But yeah, don't know what everyone's thoughts are on that.
Yes and no. I would love to see the Shack support buildings get some love. They kind of seem to have been out of the game for a while. The no factor is that Shack buildings, the interdictor and defense matrix, both have a double effect, whereas the human versions do not. I'd like to see them maybe within 1 gunnery level or 1 point of effect, as opposed to the 2 or 3 they are now.
So how about we go to 8 gunnery levels, an 8 gunnery level Thumper effect for the defense matrix, and if you're running a straight heavy Thumper, then you're getting the 10 gunnery levels. Does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. All right, so the way it's standing now is Shakar Defense Matrix is going to have a 8 gunnery level thumper, and then the heavy thumper is going to have a 10 gunnery level effect, medium 8 gunnery level, light 6 gunnery level.
I think that's really good.
Okay. All right, let me make a note and we'll get this in.
Just while you're making note of that, Frizz, has the mod changes and sorry, the weapon type changes, has that kind of put a pause on any planetary stuff you're working on? Could you give us an update in terms of where you're at with any new Dominus Hades changes? I know that's going to be an ongoing thing, and quarantine might end before it's kind of ready, which is fine. Just kind of be good to know where you're at with that, and if you haven't pulled all your hair out yet.
I've got another giant project that I've spent a month working on, and it's just starting to pay off. They're between the three, kind of between Dominus, Hades. Oh boy, I forgot one. Which one have I forgotten?
Mortem.
Mort. Between Dominus, Hades, and Mort, there's kind of enough mechanics there to glue together. Maybe it would be nice if I turned back on the Bandit Swarm or something like that. I think it was like a month and a half ago. I tried. We got the kill raw working really well, and I thought, okay, let me really do some fun stuff with the large army planets. But because those were done so late and the mechanics are really just sort of glued together, when I tried doing interesting things with those planets, they just fell over. And I'm pretty sure I broke the swarms at the same time. I deployed like 5 different Shakar bases, and then the buildings started moving, and it was just an absolute disaster. And that was just those planets were just pushed so far beyond what their code was supposed to do that of course it fell over, unfortunately. I'm still kind of thinking through what would be fun for those planets. Maybe doubling CE or something like that, I don't know. But yeah, I at some point want those planets to have the love that Aldous, Bryn, and Kanu have seen, because it's really made those compelling. It's those, but that's just such a large project. It's fallen by the wayside because of the other large project that's taken up about a month of my time, and that I'm really in hell with it right now. I fixed a really big bug on it last night, and that felt good, but it didn't feel good once I fixed that, seeing all the other things I still needed to do with it.
And I assume because you're calling it a big project, you're not letting slip of absolutely anything that it is. You can't give us anything.
Well, I think that's our answer.
Yeah.
That's a no.
So what about shack bases being turned back on? Can we kind of?
Yeah, I wanted
I can't farm shack buildings anywhere.
This is like the shack drought, and suddenly everybody had a bazillion of them, and they're like, I never have to worry about Shakar buildings. And now it's like, hey Frizz, can I get a Shakar building, please?
Yeah, my market prices are brilliant at the moment.
Yeah, I mean,
Could we?
I was kind of a really nice guy to somebody, and he never sent any back to me, so I kind of need some.
Hey. I think we were talking about about suggesting base designs back to the way where Mortem drops better bases. So maybe we can.
All right, we're doing this. Can you guys see my screen?
Oh shit! What's it gonna be?
All right. So I'm gonna have to kind of click back and forth. This is absolutely in a very broken state. But I debated whether or not I wanted to do this. I felt like I didn't, but now it's like screw it. This is probably going to come back to bite me. But so the map viewer needs the most love. I've spent a month on it. it needs a ton of work. But under the hood, I've already rewritten about 50% of the code. It's using JSON in the backend now. It's just all of the associative. I'm on the last of the associative arrays and getting rid of those. So it would be great if, like a modern game, you could right-click to do. Oh, here, let's run through this. So I can't really talk and do this at the same time. So I'm going to kind of do something and then talk. I'll need to find a new push to talk button. So a multi, it now shows you who owns the unit when you mouse over. So this is telling me it's a pale star, and it's telling me that I own it. Multis have also been completely reworked. The code for these are now much more sane, and it should be the way the browser handles it should be optimized as well. So I go into the multi. It's telling me this is my Claymore. So let's have the. We'll take the Claymore. We'll give it a. The escape key now works. So I did that with escape. Now, if you have something you don't want to do it, you can just escape out of it.
God.
Yes.
So let's go back to Claymore. Set a waypoint. The waypoint is now telling me the range. It's also telling me the move speed of the Claymore. So this is a 4-move Claymore.
Holy shit, are those coordinates while you're doing things? Oh my god.
So it's telling me. So I think the range is actually broken. Unfortunately, it's calculating off of something else. But yeah, that should be 1 square, 2 square, 3 square. But it's telling me this Claymore has a max move of 4. So let's give the Claymore a move order. And then that also works for mass move.
Wait. What? Is that a shadow? Oosh.
No, it moved.
Frizz has unlimited turns in ghosting. If you'll notice, his turn remaining is 96 minutes.
So I don't know if you guys can see this, but when I issue these move orders, these units are actually showing me exactly, they're moving to where they're going to be on their next turn, and they're building multi-boxes if multiple units end up in the same spot.
So you're projecting your movements for next turn?
Yes. And then on top of that, I can multi-box into if units end up in the same square.
I think that's only for himself. That's not for everybody though, Slayers. So.
No, I understand. No, I'm just saying like I can see everyone else's movement. This is bamboozling me a bit.
I'm also issuing all these orders through right-clicking. I'm not using hotkeys. If I give a movement really far out, then the unit moves only as far as it's capable of moving.
Sorry, so Frizz, if you were to hit Command Force 2, would that then move everything from all their different locations to one area? Yes. That work for task? Okay, so works for task forces as well.
And it would show you exactly where those task forces would end up. So this is what's taken the last month of my life when I'm not doing real work.
I think this is great. This is awesome. I think the biggest thing I love is the escape key. I know everything else is great. I love it, but the escape key for me.
Like another random thing on the map to get rid of this stupid screen.
The worst one is when you. Oh, I love it. It's good.
So escape key is now for multis. I can open and close a multi with the escape key. And also orders. So escape key works the way any other game's escape key works.
If you set a mass waypoint for a stack waypoint, can you press escape? Because I find that if you accidentally just select the open box and then press a hotkey W too soon before you clicked on a unit, you can then accidentally select that whole stack and then you can't do anything that rest of that turn. Will escape work in that instance?
I'll add that, but yeah, escape will work. It'll cancel. Currently, it cancels the order menu and it cancels a multi. I'll also have it cancel if you have an order in flight. The order system is hugely reworked as well, so that's now really easy to implement.
Great, thank you.
So that is my unplanned preview for what I have been working on for the last X weeks, and this is why Big Army Planets have not seen any love, is because this is getting 95% of my attention when it comes to coding on the game.
Well, I will personally say that I would rather see more quality of life focus than even content focus. So I'm all for it. And you were kind of off when you said when you're not doing real work. This is the only real work you should be focusing on. This is
Yeah. What I love about this is now suddenly you can plan where your army is going to be. And on top of that, I can see if I'm moving a large stack, if something isn't going to catch up.
I know this is a very specific example, but if you were to issue move out to the claymore behind you, would that then move across one, or would that have to refresh and it would place it differently? I know that's very specific.
Eventually, I want it all visual. So you'll issue orders and you'll see everything move as if it's supposed to. For the first pass, it probably won't do that. But here, let me show you guys under the hood what's happening here. All right, I'm gonna have to click on somewhere else on the screen and then talk. All right, so that block I have highlighted, everything. Oh, actually, that's the multi-box. That is the unit. So all those values, its cloak, its controlled speed, its max speed, its type, its X, its Y, all those used to live in arrays. Now the unit is self-aware. So when you click on something, it already knows how fast it can move, how far it can move, what its XY is, if it's in a multi-box, if it's not. And that just makes it so much easier to modify the game state and have the unit actually do things in the game. So all this is animation. And that's also caused a whole lot of headaches for me because I haven't really worked heavily with animations before. They're really powerful. And I'm going to be using them probably everywhere from here on out. But this is sort of the first pass to see if this is actually going to work in the game. I am worried when we roll this out how this is going to play with hundreds or thousands of units. It is low-level HTML. I'm not using a framework to do this. But that's just going to be, when I roll this out, it's probably going to be some kind of beta. And if you go deploy to a planet, you'll pull up the beta screen and you can use the new map that way. That's probably how that's going to work, so we can shake out the bugs.
Could you limit it to one planet, or does the code that you've got roll out to the turn process, does it roll out everywhere, or can you single it off to maybe one area so we know if we're going there, we've got the beta?
Well, no, it'll be, you can deploy and then you'll just modify the URL in your browser if you want to use the new beta code.
Okay, gotcha.
All right. So that is that.
This is awesome.
So yeah, I'm just at the point, movement is feeling really solid. There's a couple of weird bugs left with the animations, like extra units appearing when they aren't supposed to. So I need to tamp those down. But in terms of the foundation and a majority of the rewrite is done, I've got a whole bunch of new tooling for determining where units are, how to determine if units are with other units, getting them built together into multi-stacks so you can actually interact with them. All that work is done. Now it's just kind of fixing the little bug issues and getting the last of the features I want for the new map viewer. And Nick, with once this code is in, then the units can be aware of the acties they have on themselves, what acties they're using. I tried to just do right-clicking in the old code, and it was just so many pieces that were glued together with the arrays that were going on. It's too much to hold in your head, even with a modern IDE. But with this rewrite, Now it would just be a matter of making the unit aware that it has acties, and then we can surface the acties in the units themselves and make the game that much easier to play, and I think more fun too.
Frizz, how far away do you think the beta is? You think it's a couple of weeks away still?
So this where's our army planets? All right, I want this map thing. Come on, man, give me the map thing.
Come on, you can't. This is the carrot. You can't dangle it. What are you doing to us?
That was my fear in showing this to you guys. Is like
we won't tell anyone. It's fine. We'll keep it quiet.
Recorded, swear. I can't promise a date on this. I'm just so I've solved a lot of the animation problems. There's some weird one-off bugs I need to tamp down, and there's another piece I need to do to really make it work in terms of how I want to do this in a first pass, and then I want to get it out there to you guys. I eventually want to have each unit type have its own movement animation. So like mechas do these little hops over squares, and like tanks move along grids, and hover units kind of float. I obviously that would be way too much to do on the first pass, but because there's an animation system now driving all of this, that's completely a possibility. Just to take your question and go in a totally different direction with it.
No, the reason why I asked it is I think I know PK's working on tutorial videos, and I know that you're busy making it. Once it's passable, it'd be really good if PK could, if he's happy to, or someone in the community can put together really good cohesive understanding of what this is, because this is going to shock a lot of vets. So we need to make sure it's not an update that can't be kind of explained in depth over and over in voice and text. So we just need to make sure that we can get that out before everyone just starts losing their shit in a good and bad way.
Yeah, hopefully it's more good than bad. I mean, all this is doing is before, you would have a marker that was showing where the unit was moving to. But if you were moving beyond a unit's max speed, you had to kind of guess where you wanted the unit to go, or you had to force it into a spot. It was really just an enormous headache. This is how a game, like a turn-based game, shows you what your unit is going to do in the next turn. So that is, I think anybody who's played a modern turn-based game is expecting this kind of functionality. All right, we're at 2 hours. Anybody have any closing comments?
Did anything on? Oh, you go, PK.
Yeah, unit panel, HP is displayed based on how much HP is left. Color coded, like right now everything's blue. It's really hard to judge what's at full health, what's not at full health, what's damaged, what's not. It'd be nice if those were kind of coded for under a certain percentage, things get red, under a certain percentage, things get, yellow, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I think that's one of the big ones. Saving mod loadouts, the events window and a pop-up again would be nice. That's my big ones.
I was just going to ask if anything on Reddit stood out to you for you to address today. I know that the BA3 had a shadow buff. Maybe you might need to look at the BA2 as a result. Without getting too specific, I didn't know if there's anything that stood out to you in the suggestions that we all put together.
Sorry, I need to change my push to talk key. It keeps biting me. I gave it a scan on Thursday and Friday just to kind of see what jumped up. I saw someone posting comments about the missile pod, and that kind of put me down the rabbit hole of not only looking at the missile modifiers but also the missile weapons this week.
So, Frizz, I asked you before about re-enabling Swarm, and you said the code was to pieces. Do you think you could be comfortable re-enabling Swarm and re-enabling Shack bases, the old ones, to encourage a bit of farming and conflict across those two planets? Or are you not in a position to kind of let that go wild yet?
I started on reworking the spawn code, and when I did that, I unhooked the bandit swarm code and I started hooking it up to the new swarm code, and then I kind of left that as it was because it was looking like a much larger project than I thought. I've done modifications around that to get Shack to get just basic unit spawning a little more sane. All that code is now segmented out in its own file, and I've cleaned it up as well too. It might be in better shape than I'm thinking it is. I don't know if there's, if someone wants to start a post like bring back Swarm or bring back Shakar to the large army planets, and that gets a lot of traction on Reddit. I think that would be compelling for me to see, and then go in and maybe and see if I could do some kind of enabling of that for you guys. No Reddit multi-accounting. We've talked about this.
Hey.
Short term, like a return of shack buildings, just because there's no way to get them right now. If there's a band-aid for that, and maybe not like immediately, but just to keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah. Well, actually, so when I thought that too, when Mort spawns, the bandit bases have a handful of Shakar buildings in them, and I believe that's the only way they're coming into the game right now.
I see. Is there any way we can suggest new base designs for Mort? Or is that something that you just don't want to look at because it might be a band-aid situation?
So yeah, those, oh boy, the way I made those was I took the base designer and I built those bases by hand, and then after I saved off that design, I copy pasted it into the turn code, and that's how the bandit, and then it picks from the random bases that I created. I would much rather have it build those dynamically, where it picks like a power building, and then it picks an offensive building, and then it picks a defensive building, and it picks something random, and it sort of tries to put it in a pattern. And that, I think, is going to make the shack bases much more interesting than anything I could ever build. And that's really what I want to do with the new spawning code. And also it means that Shakar can build bases in one way, kind of more organic and sort of limb-like, and bandit bases can maybe be a little more blocky and laid out more like a city grid, kind of.
That sounds, I really like that idea. As a quick fix, would you be happy if we could go on Reddit and all suggest base designs, and you could then pick the ones you like, and then you could maybe put them into the turn code as a temporary fix, just to allow some newness to the design. Which some could be Shakar, maybe one could be Shakar heavy, and the rest could kind of be normal. At least then it could create a bit of an interesting funnel towards some building resource.
Yeah, I think I'm all for that. You would have to, so go ahead and post those. What you need to provide in the Reddit post is the name of the base that you've saved. You'd have to actually save the base off and then post the name of that save in the Reddit post, and then maybe post a screenshot of what the base looks like. If people like that, then I can pull that base design and lift out that code, then verify it, and if it looks good, then I can load it, then I can put it into the game.
So you, just to confirm, everyone does it on their personal account, not on the faction-based designer. Off the back of this, could we increase the amount of base designs we have? I think the limit's 4 on account. Could we up that maybe to 8 to 10? Because that could be, maybe if that's a quick fix, just to allow other people to play around with it. Because I know I've got a shacking base, a mining base, an empty base, and kind of it creates a bit of a limit to the designs.
Yeah. Throw that up as a post as well. We're kind of at the end. And the base design code is, I think, the second thing I ever wrote, so it's definitely on the jankier side. But hopefully, I can just increase the number of. It's probably just changing the check from 4 to 8, and that might even do it. I don't think there's anything super hard coded to limit you to 4 slots.
Awesome. Nice. Who's keeping transcript of this, or are we recording it, PK?
We're recording.
Okay, amazing. I'll just listen back to it, and I'll put a post up if everyone's happy for me to. Just for the closing bits at the end that Frizz wants to see comments on.
All right. I'm going to put up the changes that we made during today's code jam. I'm also going to put to code the ballistic mod changes we discussed last week. I'm going to post the missile changes that came up this week. I'll link to a thread specific to the missile changes. If no one is absolutely screaming that this is terrible in that thread over the next couple days, or if the feedback looks overwhelmingly positive, then we can push out the missile changes sooner. And if that's the case, then I'll look to next week would be energy. But if we can get missile out quicker, then maybe I can get energy up a little sooner if we don't need to sleep on it quite as much. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the Code Jam. Always appreciate it. These are fun. I'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, man. Take care.
Take it easy.
Have a good one. Appreciate you, first.